and welcome to today's webcast, Beyond Forefront TMG to Simplified Security. My name is Chantelle, and I will be your moderator. Joining me as our speakers today are Scott Glew, co-founder and chief product officer at Fastvue, Chris McCormack, senior product marketing manager at Sophos, and Jorn Lutters, sales engineer at Sophos. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. If at any time you have questions for our speakers during the webcast, please submit them through the GoToWebinar console, and we'll try and answer them towards the end. And also, a copy of today's recording and the slides will be sent to each of you on the call towards the end of the day today or first thing tomorrow. And with that, let me hand it over to Chris to begin today's discussion.
All right, thanks, Chantelle, and thanks everyone for joining us. As she said, my name is Chris McCormack, and I work in the Network Security Products Division at Sophos. And today we're going to talk a little bit about TMG. And I thought I would start by just having a quick overview with you of what we see as TMG opportunities out there for Sophos and Fastvue. We all know that TMG is coming to an end, so let's have a quick look at what everyone loved about TMG and how we can address that going forward. So if you look at Microsoft's view of what TMG was, this is probably somewhat familiar to you. These are the sort of key components that Microsoft considered part of the threat management gateway capabilities. Of course, it includes secure web access features, firewall features, email protection, intrusion prevention, and some great remote access capabilities, as well as the obvious deployment and management tools and some subscription services. Now, all of these things not everyone used. Of course, some organizations really used TMG sort of to protect and add a layer of security to exchange access for external users. Others used it strictly as a firewall. But I have a list of features that we've talked to IT managers about that are considered the most important features to have. And so I'm going to quickly run through that. But before I do, I thought we'd recap on what exactly has happened to Microsoft TMG. So back about 18 months ago, they discontinued the product. And what that really means is that we have until around the end of 2015 to find a replacement solution, because the real problem after 2015 is that there will no longer be updates for the subscription services. That includes things like the web protection, URL filtering, the virus and malicious software scanning, and the IPS system. Those updates will cease starting in 2016. No updates anymore. So the real deadline, if you like, even though the product will be supported through till 2020, is to try and find a solution in the next 12 months to replace this and get it deployed before the updates stop. So when we asked IT managers like yourselves, what did you use or what did you like the most about Microsoft TMG, therefore defining what you would feel to be the most important requirements for a replacement product, this was the list that we got from folks like yourselves. At the top of the list these days is Hyper-V support. Of course, a lot of people are using the firewall and IPS aspects, but there's an equal number of a large number of IT shops out there using the stuff at the bottom of the list: the reverse proxy SSL offloading, and the authentication capabilities, as I said, to use it to protect and add a layer of security in front of Exchange Outlook web access. And then there was a lot of organizations using stuff in the middle of this list, particularly for VPN and site-to-site secure connections. Also, some organizations using it for basic forward proxy content scanning and web URL policy enforcement. So these are all the key features that IT managers said, you know, if we're looking for a replacement, these are the things we must have. And so fortunately, Sophos UTM makes a perfect TMG replacement, because it not only addresses all of those key requirements, if you like, or key features that TMG had, but it brings a lot more to the table. So let's have a look at some of that now. When we looked at network firewall features, the key features people want out of TMG for this, or enjoyed about TMG, were the stateful packet inspection, the advanced NAT, and of course the client VPN capabilities with remote access with PPTP and L2TP. These are sort of the key requirements. But with Sophos UTM, you get much more. You get IP version 6 support, which is never going to be supported in TMG. You get the ability to integrate Amazon's cloud infrastructure with your network, your on-premise network, using our Amazon Virtual Private Cloud Connector that enables the UTM to protect infrastructure in the cloud. And we've recently introduced two-factor authentication with a one-time password solution that provides an added layer of security for a variety of different services on the UTM. So these are sort of some of the great features that you get in addition to the kinds of things you've been used to with Microsoft TMG. But that's not all, of course. When you look at the protection capabilities that TMG provided, of course it had an IPS, some good site-to-site and client-based VPN infrastructure, WAN link balancing, client authentication, and flexible load balancing and failover. Of course, you get all of that with the Sophos UTM, or our Unified Threat Management Platform, but you also get a lot more. We provide an HTML5 VPN portal that allows clientless VPN. So a user can simply go to the user portal and click a button to connect to resources that that you set up for them to have VPN access to. Super simple and super easy. And of course, we've recently introduced advanced threat protection, which goes a lot, much beyond IPS and web filtering to sort of look at multi-layered traffic inspection, app control, IPS, web, bring all of those together to try and identify infected hosts on the network that may be trying to communicate with botnets or CNC servers. And as well, we can download and selectively sandbox content that's passing through the firewall that may not appear malicious initially. We can sandbox that over time in the Sophos labs and actually see if it's malicious down the road, and if so, inform you so you can clean it up. These are great features that are sort of the cutting edge or bleeding edge of network security, and those are now in our Sophos Unified Threat Management Platform, things that TMG would never have. Now, when it comes to web protection, this is pretty much table stakes these days for any web gateway. You got to have anti-malware, URL filtering, application control, user policies built around that, of course, reporting and troubleshooting tools. And of course, the Sophos UTM provides all of those capabilities that you might be used to with TMG, but also adds an interesting ability to integrate with our endpoint product. As you probably know, we have not only a network gateway, our UTM, but also endpoint desktop AV clients for Windows, Macs, Linux, and other platforms. And so what we can do is integrate our UTM with our Sophos Enterprise console managed endpoint clients. And what that allows you to do is enforce web policy on the endpoint when the user leaves the network. That means that they're not only protected on the web when they're within the protected confines of the LAN, but when they leave, go home to work at the airport, on a business trip, they're similarly protected thanks to the Sophos desktop AV client that's enforcing web policy and filtering web traffic for them on their endpoint. And we've recently introduced some new features that make it even easier to integrate with your Active Directory service for single sign-on authentication for users accessing the web when the UTM is running in transparent mode. And we've got some great device-specific authentication tools so that you can use iPads or iPhones or other mobile devices on your network and enforce web policy on those at the same time. So again, lots of great added features if you move from TMG to the UTM in terms of web protection. Now in email protection, of course, a lot of this functionality has been around for a long time, filtering spam and stopping malware in email. But when you deploy UTM, you get a lot more capability, because we've been really focused on not only spam, which is largely a solved problem these days. We're making it easier by letting users manage their own quarantine, but really focusing on phishing attacks, which are becoming more and more problematic. And so we've got lots of cool technology in there around detecting phishing. And we've got some great features in the UTM for data protection, particularly making email encryption easy. You can send an encrypted email. Any user can send an email and have it be encrypted and sent to a user with no infrastructure on the recipient's end whatsoever. It's a very cool and innovative feature that makes email encryption pretty elegant and simple. And we've also integrated DLP recently into the UTM so that we can do content-based inspection of the emails and determine if they should be sent, and if so, should they be encrypted. And you have full control over making these DLP rules. So if you're in an environment where you need to protect data from leaving the organization, you can easily set up a rule to detect that in emails and block it or encrypt it. Lots of great new features we've added in email protection that go well beyond stopping spam. All right, now web server protection. This is what a lot of folks we talk to use TMG for. And in fact, Sophos uses TMG, or has used TMG for this very function as well. And that's as a reverse proxy authentication layer between Outlook Web Access and external users. And of course, you can use it for web application firewall to protect your servers that are running applications that are facing the internet, and do some anti-malware scanning and cookie protection. Of course, Sophos UTM provides these features, and we recently added reverse proxy authentication in one of our latest releases. And on top of that, you also get things like form hardening, URL hardening, and we have a number of great WAF, or web application firewall features, to really harden and protect web applications running in your environment from outside hacking attempts. And Jorn's actually going to show you a demo of how the reverse authentication works in a minute, after we get through just how great the Sophos UTM is at helping you move on from TMG. So I mentioned earlier how there are a number of features that IT managers like yourselves have indicated are sort of key requirements. Maybe you don't need all of these things, but between you and your peers out there in the industry, this is sort of the essential key capabilities that are needed of any replacement solution. And so we've gone through a lot of these. The Sophos UTM up until recently addressed all but one of these, the reverse proxy authentication, which we recently addressed in our UTM 9.2 release a few months ago. So now the Sophos UTM addresses all of these key requirements for TMG replacement, but adds even more in almost every area. You get much more flexible deployment choices, you get a lot more customization, a lot more reporting. It's just a much more well-rounded, fleshed-out solution than TMG ever was in almost every department. So I've talked a lot about some of the features that you get by moving from TMG to Sophos UTM, but what are some of the sort of general advantages? Well, one great thing is you get everything you need in a single appliance, and we're unique in that regard. A lot of the competing solutions out there who are positioning themselves as a TMG replacement are probably lacking one or the other of these three key capabilities, which is you need a firewall, you need a forward proxy for protecting users inside, and you need a reverse proxy for protecting yourself from hacks outside. And we're one of the only vendors, as you'll see, I think Scott's going to talk a little bit about this, that provides all three of these capabilities in a single appliance. And the great thing about it is you can deploy this in a number of different ways. We offer this appliance, our UTM, as a software appliance, so you can install it on a Windows server, even the same hardware that you're using for TMG today if you want. We run in Hyper-V, of course, and you can run it in in VMware. You can run our hardware appliances. We have super fast SG series hardware appliances that we've just released, and of course you could even run it in the Amazon cloud. So you have more flexible deployment options than any other solution out there today. And we've really focused on ease of use. If you know anything about Sophos, you probably know that we're really focused on making security simple, and that's certainly true with our UTM product. What we've done, though, is not make it dumb simple. We're not trying to make it so simple like maybe Apple, where everything is so easy because we've really dumbed it down. That's not it at all. We've actually made it simple, but without sacrificing any features or capabilities. You get greater customization and configuration probably than you're used to with TMG, but it's actually easier, certainly not any more difficult. And it's a great opportunity to consolidate and simplify. Maybe you have a number of different servers, routers, other network appliances in your environment. This is a great opportunity to look at that and not only replace TMG, but maybe consolidate some network capabilities, security features in your organization into one single appliance and deal with one vendor. The other thing is our UTM goes well beyond just providing the essentials. We've got some great add-ons that you can take advantage of as well, and some integration with our other products. For example, the UTM can also manage your Wi-Fi. It's got an integrated Wi-Fi controller. We have RED devices, which are simple, small, affordable boxes that you simply send to your branch offices or remote offices, have them plug it in. The UTM will automatically detect it and set it up as a VPN connection between the UTM and the RED device. So it's a simple way without anyone technical on the other end to set up VPN connections between your offices. Of course, you can manage endpoints or desktop AV from the UTM. If you want a single point of management for both your network and your desktop AV, you can do that. And with our endpoints, you can also enforce web policy, as I mentioned earlier, on the endpoint. So when users leave the network, their web policy is still in effect and they're still protected from malicious websites. And of course, you can add any of these security capabilities on our UTM anytime. We have a very flexible modular licensing solution. So if all you need initially to replace TMG is maybe the WAF capabilities of our UTM, certainly deploy that to start with, and then as you desire, you can add extra capabilities and ultimately consolidate a lot of your network security products into one single appliance over time. And of course, if you're a larger organization with multiple offices where you may want to have local traffic filtering in each location, you can easily manage multiple UTMs across multiple locations with our Sophos UTM management platform, which is our centralized management solution. And of course, it goes without saying that unlike TMG, UTM is a bright future and roadmap. We're doing regular releases, at least 2 a year, with significant feature upgrades in all regards. And Jorn's going to actually talk a little bit now about what's coming in that regard with some of the future work we're doing with the UTM around TMG features. So I'll hand it over to Jorn.
Okay, I'm just waiting for the screen to refresh. Good evening, or should I say good afternoon, because we're in a different time zone. I'm Jorn Lutters. I work for the Karlsruhe office, where a lot of the development on the web application firewall is taking place, and I've been asked by Chris to give you a short update on what's coming and to give you a short presentation or demonstration, better said, of the features that people will use quite frequently if they're replacing TMG, which is to say the reverse proxy and the authentication features. So with that said, let's dig into what's coming. Okay, so we are, as a company, dedicated to making sure that we are not a good TMG replacement. We want to be the best TMG replacement there is. And this is our ongoing commitment. So everything that we think that might be missing is going to be added. Everything that customers give us feedback about that should be better, we're going to improve that. We are generally out there to make sure that if you buy a TMG replacement from us, it's going to do everything you expect it to do. So some of the things that came up and that we're currently working on are persistent authentication, which is something that people have used a lot in TMG to allow authentication to basically do single sign-on between something like a SharePoint server and Office applications. Some of the other things we're looking into is the X509 client certificate support for authentication and two-factor authentication. This is very important, especially to the European market, because we have a lot of governments who require to use at least one additional factor of authentication. So this is something that we're currently working on as well. One of the things that's been actually released this afternoon is the customizable timeouts for backend servers. This was something that we ran into when we had partners deploy Microsoft Lync servers in a mobile deployment. They found out they needed customizable timeouts. We sent that report to development, and voila, we added it. One of the other things that's been requested a lot is the manual cookie renaming for load balancing, which is also a feature that's important for Lync. And I'm proud to say that we're working on that as well, which should probably make its way into the next feature release. And one of the things that I'm currently testing myself is the authentication pre- and post-fixing. Anyone who's ever used a TMG will probably be familiar with the functionality to add a default domain name to an authentication. This was not present in UTM. We got reports from this. I sat down with development last Friday. They sent me a working demo of it on Monday, and we're currently testing this. So this is the level of dedication that we have going here. But what we want to do is we want to add what TMG had to offer, which is, of course, adding a default domain in a domain slash scenario. But we also recognize that a lot of people want to use UPNs for authentication. So instead of going for just doing a TMG replacement, we're also adding the option to use a UPN and postfix that to authentication, so that we are basically more compatible with what our people are actually using. Okay, with that said, let's go and do a short demonstration of the reverse proxy authentication. Now, I hope that if I press Alt-Tab, yes, we have switched to my UTM's web admin. Okay, so to set up web server protection for an Exchange server, first up, we will want to configure the authentication, which is basically the reason we're deploying this in a lot of scenarios. So if we go to reverse authentication, we can configure a new authentication profile. Let's give this thing a name. Let's select the front end mode, which is going to be a forms-based authentication. Let's set a realm. Which is the unique URL the UTM is going to be using to generate the form on. What template do we want to use? Well, you can completely customize your template in any kind of way you want. For the intents and purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to use the default template here. And then we get to the backend mode, which currently only supports basic authentication or offloading. Well, since I want to show the awesome features of our product, let's go for basic here and do a full pass-through of the authentication. Now let's select the users we want to give access to this. I'm going to select my group Active Directory users, which contains everyone in the organization with a functional Active Directory username and password. And let's hit save on that. So this is the authentication profile, and we're going to use that further on with the web application firewall. We're actually configuring the profile for the Exchange. So without further ado, let's look into the firewall profiles, which is actually the security that the product can offer. Let's create a new firewall profile that I'll call Exchange with OWA. Let's set it to reject mode so that it will drop any traffic that might violate whatever policy we set here. Let's enable the common threats filter, which then gives you a very nice menu that we see here. I can fold open, and this shows you all the different techniques we can deploy in not just recognizing attacks, but also recognizing irregularities that might indicate an attack. So let's disable some checks here that do not make sense. We do not have an SQL backend. We do not need cross-site scripting because there is no JavaScript locally running on the client, and we are not using it as a proxy, so outbound can be disabled as well. And let's go for some extra security. The people out there who have used Microsoft's bigger brother to TMG, called UAG, might already be familiar with this, but for those who aren't, URL hardening basically sets which paths and which physical pages are reachable in a published scenario. So that means that nobody can access anything unless we add it to the entry URLs. We can specify these manually, similarly to the way this worked in UAG, or you can upload a Google sitemap file or a Google sitemap URL in case your website's already been sitemapped by Google. I'm going to go for the manual specification because I don't think Google has indexed my lab already. I'm not sure, but let's not take any chances here and just go for the regular setup. So I'll add the /OWA and the /ECP directory, which is what we're going to need for basic OAuth functionality. And what else are we going to do? Well, let's enable some antivirus, shall we? Antivirus basically scans all the traffic going back and forth between the client and the server, and you have the option to have this passed through a single engine or to a dual engine. In the latter, you will not just use the Sophos engine, but you will also be using an Avira engine to scan the traffic. So let's go for the most secure option. Let's go for a dual scan. And the direction, as I said, it will always monitor both directions, but based on what you configure here, it's going to check either for uploads, it's going to check for downloads, or it's going to check for both. My general recommendation here is to enable both, because what's worse than having someone email you a virus, it is spreading a virus through your email. So let's make sure that our server is not anywhere near something that might do that. Okay, so now we have a profile set. Now what can we do? Oh wait, I forgot something. There are two specific rules that I'll need to skip to make sure that our traffic is actually allowed. These IDs that I'm entering here are references to our backend database for the filtering that we're using. So these would normally trigger false positives if we enable rigid filtering, which I'm going to do now. But since rigid filtering is such a great feature because it decreases all kinds of tolerances and will basically block any kind of traffic as soon as it gets to a level that we think might be suspicious, I'll need to add some filter skip rules to make sure that the traffic for our OWA is actually allowed. Okay, let's save that again, and let's go to the actual virtual web server. So the virtual web server is in its concept equal to the TMG web listener. Here is where we combine whatever security features we have with an external IP address, with an SSL certificate, and the server where it should be sent to. So let's just call this Exchange OWA. Let's select the interface where this is listening on, which I will use this additional IP address for. You can choose between HTTP and HTTPS. Since we're a security company, I'm going to say use HTTPS regardless. If you do that, then it will give you a nice checkbox here that will automatically allow you to redirect HTTP to HTTPS traffic, similar as the one you'd find in the web listener in TMG. Next up, we're going to select a certificate for this connection. Since we're going to be configuring OWA, I'm going to go for my webmail.example. And let's add a real server. I think I already have one here. Okay, here's my exchange. I'm going to drag and drop this to my real server configuration. I will call this my exchange backend. And once again, you can choose whether the UTM is going to be speaking HTTP or HTTPS to the backend. In case you select HTTP here, we're going to provide SSL offloading. In case you select HTTPS here, we are not just going to be doing the SSL encryption, we're also doing the re-encryption to the backend. So like I said, we're a security company. I would generally recommend using HTTPS for your backend servers because, well, no matter how well you trust your people inside your network, it's generally just a better idea to not send any kind of data unencrypted, especially when it's something sensitive like email. So we'll hit save here. We'll select that real server, and then we will select our exchange with OWA profile from the firewall profile drop-down. Okay, and then we'll go to advanced, where we have some more options. We will not be rewriting HTML. We will not be disabling compression support because the compression used by IIS for OWA is actually compatible with our product. So what we will be doing is we'll be passing the host header to the Exchange server, which in turn will enable the Exchange server to know the actual host header we're using instead of the one we configured as the name for the backend server, which of course is very important in an Exchange scenario because otherwise features like auto-discover have no idea whether or not you're in or outside the company if you do not do this. So let's hit save on that. And then before I click this little slider to enable my Exchange OWA, I have a couple of things that I will need to look into before I can do that. So one of the things that we will need to do is we'll need to go to the exceptions and create a new exception list item. I will call this one Exchange Exceptions, and here what we're going to do is we will skip URL hardening for specific paths because we found that due to the nature of the traffic that Exchange uses, there are certain false positives that might occur if we do not skip URL hardening for all directories below /OWA because of the dynamic URLs being used. So how are we going to select which paths should be skipped? We'll be using a filter that selects for specific paths. And here we'll just add those. So that would be /OWA ** and /ECP **. And that's the configuration here. Now, this will enable straight away so that we don't forget it. The last thing we do before I enable the virtual server is we'll go into site path routing and we will click on the default route that's been created. So here is where we will see our reverse authentication profile make a comeback. So let's first set the path to /OWA/ and here we can say, okay, we want to use reverse authentication for this path. The reason we do this on a path basis is that, for example, let's say I have www.company.com and I will have a /, which is basically my website, which people can visit, which is just for the public. And then I will want to have one part of the site that is for employees only. Let's call this /private. button, and in order to enable you to do that, we will need to make sure that when you actually reach /private, we can start enforcing authentication. So that's why you can create different profiles for that. That said, I've got the reverse authentication configured. Let's hit save. Let's go to the virtual web server. Let's now enable our Exchange OWA. Let's click our refresh button here. The status changes to a very nice green tick. And let's go for it. So webmail.example.com/OWA/ now automatically being redirected from HTTP to HTTPS, and I'm presented with a nice Sophos login form. Once again, this form can be completely customized in whatever way you would like. We have support for basically uploading your own HTML file, your own style sheets, whatever, as long as you have 2 fields, which is completely explained in the documentary. For the username and password, we will allow it. That said, let's log into our Exchange and hit the login button here. And there we go. It loaded my OWA. And this is the part where I am going to excuse myself for being a foreigner, because this is obviously not in English. So that said, that's all there is to it. You create a profile, you create the security for the profile, you add authentication, you add a server, and then you hit the nice little switch to enable it. It's basically the same configuration as you do in TMG, with the obvious difference that you're now doing it in a UTM, which will of course mean that you'll need to get used to having some different looking configuration items. Then again, what you are actually configuring is of course similar to what you do in a TMG scenario. I think that ends my part of the webcast, and I will now gladly hand this over to Scott, who's going to be talking about the features that they have in their very nice reporter for UTM. So Scott, take it away.
All right, thanks very much, Jorn. That was a very informative demo. So I am the co-founder and chief product officer at Fastvue, and I'm here to talk to you today specifically about moving from Forefront TMG to Sophos UTM from a reporting perspective. Now I'm sure everyone listening here is familiar with the reports that you can get out of Forefront TMG, so I thought I'd start with a very serious question, which is, what is the difference between a report from Forefront TMG and a trampoline? And the answer is, of course, you need to take your shoes off to jump on a trampoline. So terrible jokes aside, we all know the reports out of Forefront TMG leave a lot to be desired. But that's cool, because Fastvue came on the scene a couple of years ago and we solved this problem with TMG Reporter. And there was much rejoicing. We got heaps of very positive feedback. Thousands of downloads later, it almost became the industry standard really for reporting on Forefront TMG. But then Microsoft killed TMG, and as you can imagine, us at Fastvue took this news pretty seriously as a company that developed their first product around a now dying platform. So we listened to our customers and we kept a very close ear to the ground in the industry to see what is going to be the best replacement option for Forefront TMG moving forward. And as you've heard today, Sophos UTM very quickly went to the top of that list, really because of the feature-for-feature matching that you can get all in a single solution. You don't need to buy lots of different boxes to get the various features. And the good news is the reports are better. If you get Sophos UTM, you're going to have better reporting than you can get out of Forefront TMG. But they're no TMG reporter. So what we were hearing from our customers was they really want to move to Sophos UTM, but they want to keep the great reports that they've been getting, the instinctive reporting interface they've been using for the last couple of years through TMG Reporter. So we answered that. We said, no worries, let's create Sophos Reporter as our second reporting product. And so now all of our TMG Reporter customers can keep the same reporting interface that they've known and loved for the past couple of years, And now Sophos UTM customers can also enjoy the very extensive Fastvue reporting options as well. Options such as when did a user access a website? Unfortunately, you can't get that from the UTM's inbuilt reports. Sure, you can report on a date, but knowing when a user went to a website within that date is impossible. The timestamp is actually scrubbed from the reporting database. So this is important for schools when they want to know when little Johnny accessed a website, was in his maths class or is in English class, and so on. Also, who is my most unproductive web user? The Sophos UTM reports, you can run a report on, say, the adult category or the gambling category, but you can't run a report on both. And there's about 50 other categories you might deem as unproductive. So getting an idea of who is your most unproductive user is a little tricky. And just to extend that a little bit, what unproductive websites are actually being allowed through the UTM? And on the flip side of that, what productive sites are being blocked by the UTM and why? You know, the last thing you want to do when you implement the UTM is make your organization less productive. So you as a UTM administrator want to know what policy is responsible for actually blocking or allowing traffic. And these are all reports that you just really can't get from the UTM itself. So what I'm going to do is jump over to my web browser here, and I'm going to show you a little bit of Sophos Reporter in action and how you can do these various things. So if you're familiar with TMG Reporter, you'll notice this is very, very similar. You've got a live dashboard here showing you information about today in the last 15 minutes. We also have the Reports tab and alerts at the top. And you can use different dashboards for bandwidth, productivity, and web protection. Now, we have redesigned the productivity dashboard a little bit, so we're focusing more on the undesirable sites that are actually being allowed through the UTM. And also we've got allowed undesirable applications. We also have, blocked acceptable browsing. And this is all using the productivity settings that you can define over here on the settings tab. It's very, very simple. Just like in TMG Reporter, you simply drag and drop the web categories onto the right productivity list, hit save, and all of your reporting will reflect that from that point on. So it's a great idea just to review everything in the acceptable list. That's where we put anything that's a bit of a gray area. So review that list and put it into unproductive or unacceptable as per your organization's requirements. Now if I just go back to the dashboard here, I'm going to go to the productivity section and let's just run a report on my most unproductive user, which at the moment is Padme Amidala. By the way, if you can run Sophos Reporter in demo mode if you don't have a live UTM to connect to, just so you can play around with the reports and make sure it's what you're after. If you do that, you get cool Star Wars characters to report on. So we've got, this is what we like to call non-nerd reporting. Anyone should be able to understand this report. You can see exactly how much Padme Amidala's downloaded, what the top site was, what their top category was, all the sites they accessed and when throughout the day they were browsing. But as this is my most unproductive user, I'm going to go to the productivity section. In particular, I'm going to go to the unproductive browsing by site section just to see what sites they've been accessing. So there's a few sites up here that are looking a bit dubious, but because I'm a very boring employer, I don't want people looking at sports sites at work. So I want to know when people are accessing foxsports.com. I don't really care about Padme Amidala anymore, so I'm going to remove her from the filter. I want to know when anyone is accessing Fox Sports. So you would have seen I had the option there to run an activity report or an overview report. An activity report is very, very different to the activity report that we were just running then. As you can see, it's a chronological report. So I can see at 8 a.m. These people were browsing foxsports.com. The little green chart indicates when they were browsing those sites and for how long. So, and I can click on these rows to see the full details, such as the page that she was looking at and the images she was downloading and so on, including the full timestamp and web categories. So you can really get a nice indication of when people are accessing this site throughout the day. And you can imagine that you can just run this report on a single user and see exactly what they were doing at that time as well. I'm just going to go back to the dashboard and I'm going to go back to the productivity dashboard. And the other thing you will probably like to do as a Sophos UTM as an administrator is look at what is being blocked and find out why it's being blocked. So this table here shows you anything you've classified as productive or acceptable. and it's actually being blocked by the UTM. So here's one that's been classified as productive. It's the finance and banking category. So I'm going to run a report on that category there. And just like we saw before, we're going to pull out a list of all users that have been accessing that category. We're also going to see a list of all the sites that people are accessing in that category. But more specifically, I'm interested in finding out why this was blocked. So we've got a web protection section of this report. I'm sorry, I think my machine's running a little bit slow with all the VMs happening in the background. But let's go to the web protection section, and we can see that most of this traffic is being allowed, but some of it's being blocked. So, and then we've got the filter actions, which actually pulls out the policies that are responsible for anything to do on the finance and banking category. As you can see, we've got 3 at the bottom here: protect users from nasties, prevent time wasting, and conserve bandwidth. So perhaps there was a finance and banking site with a large video or a virus or so on, and again you can hover over the green arrow to run further reports on this to find out the full details in an activity report if you so desire. The other thing you can do in Sophos Reporter is receive live alerts. So I'm going to go to the Alerts tab here, and anything you want to be alerted to in real time that you don't necessarily want to run a report on, you can configure. So here we've got threats detected. So whenever a virus is discovered, you can receive a live email with who the user was, where they downloaded it from, whether it was blocked or allowed, and so on. And even things such as unproductive or unacceptable browsing, you can receive this in email form with the user, the site, and the category, and so on. And all of this is completely customizable. Things like large downloads, gambling access, whatever you can dream of, you can configure an alert for. Now, one thing we haven't yet added to TMG Reporter, which is available in Sophos Reporter right now, is the ability to report on security groups. So we've always allowed you to report on anything that the UTM logs or anything that TMG logs, such as filter actions, proxy profiles, sites like youtube.com, and so on. But we also pull out things from Active Directory, such as departments, companies, offices. But now we've got security groups as well. So you can say security group equal to managers and, well, any other primetime editors, why not? Any other group you want to run a report on. You can run the report now, just selecting the date range, or hit schedule report, and then I can schedule this report and send it to managers@mycompany.com, whoever's responsible for those security groups that you want to send that report to. So report scheduling is very, very easy in Sophos Reporter. If security groups aren't your thing, you can also do things such as source IP in subnet. So there's a lot of operators you can use, such as contains and starts with and whatnot. And I want to go 10.1.0.0/16. So it's only going to report on the 10.1 subnet. And again, I can schedule that to the right person or run the report now and share it and so on. And one thing I'd also like to mention, just trying to make sure I've covered off everything, I've done alerts, yep, that's all good, is Jorn was talking about the templates that you can set in the UTM when doing reverse proxy. I'm actually responsible for the TMG responsive auth forms, which you may have come across for TMG. Basically turns in TMG's form into something that looks good on iPhones and iPads and is a little more responsive and has all the functionality that you'd expect from the TMG form. And I've also got a version here for the Outlook web app to make it look like the 2013 style. And this is something I'm planning to rebadge basically for Sophos UTM. So you'll have a template that you could upload for Outlook Web Access that works with Sophos UTM as well. So just keep an eye on this GitHub repo. I'm Scott Glew on GitHub, and hopefully I'll add it in here. It may have a different name because Forefront TMG won't make sense if I rebadge it for Sophos UTM. But I just thought I'd mention that after watching Jorn's demo just before. So now that, I believe, yes, I've been through scheduling department reports and subnet reports, custom alerts. So these are all the things that Sophos Reporter answers over and above the Sophos UTM reports. So please download it, give it a go, and let us know what you think. And as you can see, we're getting a lot of positive feedback coming in. It's still early days, but the word on the street is it is a very, very good complement to the UTM's in-built reporting. And that concludes my demonstration. So I'm going to pass it back over to Chantelle.
Great, thanks, Scott. We do have several questions that have come in, so if we don't get to all of them, we will get to you directly following the webcast. But let's start off here. This first one came in while you were presenting, Jorn. So between you and Chris, I'll let you answer this. Does the two-factor authentication support Radius, and is that available today?
I'll answer that. Yes, it is, and yes, it does. So yes, it's available. Yes, it's available today, and you can use Radius as a backend for OTP, no problem. The thing we are emphasizing, though, is that we have a built-in OTP solution as well, which requires no backends, no RSA servers, no anything, just the UTM and some smartphones if you want to use it. So that's all, and it's free with every potential version of UTM.
Great. And Jorn, here's another one for you. We use TMG's web client for proxy authentication. Do we need to install some kind of client software on client computers to have transparent authentication with Sophos UTM?
That depends. That depends largely on how you use it. So for the web-based traffic, that is not the case. We can transparently intercept traffic, authenticate it, and then apply the appropriate policy. It does apply to protocols that are not web-specific. In those cases, we will indeed need to have a client on the workstations, which is, of course, bundled in with the Sophos UTM. It's called the Sophos Authentication Agent, and anyone who has ever set up the Microsoft Firewall client will be instantly familiar. It's simply, it's basically the same program. You install it, it takes your authentication credentials and then sets up a secure tunnel to the UTM to make sure that your credentials are being used whenever you access something that requires authentication.
Okay, great. Chris, this came in while you were presenting. It's about when you were presenting about web protection. There's two questions on that. Does Sophos Web Protection support WPAD options to push auto-detect proxy to client systems?
That's a pretty technical question, Jorn. Do you have any idea what that's about?
Yes, and I can answer that even because it does. We support WPAD and PAC, so you can use both versions of automatic proxy pushing, and we even allow you to customize the pack file completely through the GUI. So unlike with TMG, where you'd had to do a couple of tricks, in our product in the UTM, you just go to the advanced settings, and there you can create your own pack script and then distribute that. So yes, we do.
And this same person sent directly following that question was, can you provide more information on how web caching works with web protection? I don't know if we want to get on that right now, but Jorn, is that something you can touch upon briefly?
How it works, I would need some more details. I can answer that very generically in saying that we cache responses that are being requested a lot. So you will not see something like protected data in your cache. But if you need more details on that, then please make sure that I get those questions on email so I can actually look into the specific answer for this question.
Okay, we'll do that. Scott, this one is for you. This person's just asking about purchasing. Do they need to go directly, can they purchase directly from you, or do they need to go through the Sophos partner?
Right, so we've adopted the Sophos philosophy on that of channel only. So if you have a Sophos partner, then get in touch with them and say, hey, I'm really interested in Fastvue, and then we'll have that conversation with the partner and get a quote out to you. You can also, as it's shown on the screen here, if you go to fastvue.co/sophos/pricing, or just follow your nose to the pricing page, there's a form that you can fill out to request a quote. So if you don't have a partner you'd like to use, we can suggest one for you and get in contact with them. So you can't purchase direct, but you can purchase through a partner.
Great, thank you. Jorn, here, you're in the hot seat again. Can a TMG configuration be directly imported into Sophos UTM? If not, is there a guide to assist in the migration?
Well, that's actually a very good question. Let me be as verbatim as I can be. We are working on an automated importer for the configuration. The current status of that to me is that we have a working script that will import all objects, but it will not import rules. So unless you feel like having a ton of objects without any policy attached, then of course you can do that. What I would, however, advise to do is go to our website, which is here on the nice slide. It's www.sophos.com/tmg, and then download the TMG Administrator's Guide to UTM, which contains strategies on migrating from TMG to UTM. It contains tips on all kinds of technical problems you're going to run into and all common scenarios we have thus far seen when we are actually migrating TMG customers. So I would very much advise anyone who is going to replace a TMG with a UTM to download that guide beforehand and make sure that you have read up on everything that you can expect.
Yeah, and let me add to that our professional services team, certainly in North America and I believe in other regions, is not only working on that automated tool, but they're available to help customers transition as well.
Jorn, does UTM, a Sophos UTM run under Windows Server like TMG does, or does it have its own OS kernel? If both, what are the differences?
No, it only runs on its own OS, which, by the way, is a Linux derivative that we have very, very heavily modified for security. So no, you will not need to run it on Windows. The upside of that is that you will not need a Windows Server license for your UTM. So there are no additional costs on top of just having your UTM.
And what about, does UTM support Phishing Exchange 2010, 2013 DAGS?
That question I don't really understand. It supports using Exchange in a high availability scenario. You can use multiple front ends, or in this case, in the configuration from TMG, they're actually called backends. So yes, you can use a DAG-based Exchange farm, but I don't really understand the question for the rest. So
no problem. I'll get clarification on that.
Okay, good.
Okay, two more here. Does UTM have any FIPS or other certifications like TMG?
I'm going to hand this one to Chris. He'll probably have some more information on that.
Certifications, I'm not really sure what they're after there.
Well, I know we are certified, but I don't know if there are any market-specific certifications for the United States or North America available. So I'm really handing this over to you. And
yeah, I'm afraid I don't know off the top of my head. That's something we'll have to get back to them on.
No problem. We'll reach out. He had some other questions too, and we are approaching the top of the hour, so I'm going to have to cut it off there, but we will certainly answer all of your questions offline here shortly. I just want to thank everyone for joining. Thank you, speakers, and please look for a link to the recording and the slides from today's presentation. And with that, we will close today's session, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.